Hey y'all, welcome back to the Takeoff. I'm Max Henry. Thank you as always for joining me here. This week we've got Alec Blenis. If you're unfamiliar with Alec, maybe you've seen him on Instagram. That's how I saw him, through Callum Powell sharing some of his evidence-based memes. He shares some really, really funny research-backed memes for strength and conditioning. So if you're a nerd like me, you may have already seen this stuff floating around. And if you have not, be prepared to learn a ton about longevity and recovery, nutrition, all the way to politics at the end of this episode. We really do cover it all. I do a little more exposition on this one than I normally do because Alec is from outside of the parkour community. I know most of you guys who are listening are in the parkour community, and I wanted to give him a little bit of context for his answers so that he could address specific questions like, hey, how much should a parkour athlete run? To you guys, knowing as much as possible about our sport and what we want to get out of somebody whose goal is to kind of help people get fitter, faster, and stronger. And that's my goal for you as the listener. And I think there's some really, really solid takeaways. At least I got some great takeaways from this episode on how to incorporate more cardio, more fitness in general into my routine and do it in a way that isn't drawing back from my parkour training, but actually is empowering me to maybe train parkour even more in addition to adding all this other stuff in. If you're not already following Alec on Instagram, go check him out at Alec Blenis. I'll link that in the description. And yeah, he's hilarious. He's got tons and tons of amazing programming. I've actually been on his programming twice, currently on it right now. Can confirm it is fantastic. So go ahead and check that out. I'll again plug that at the end of the episode, but I'll do it now as well. And yeah, without further ado, I'll stop talking and let you guys get into it. Enjoy the episode. Here's Alec. Alec Blenis, thank you so much for coming on to the Takeoff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to nerding out over parkour, hybrid training, maybe some vegan diet stuff. Anything's fair game today.
All of the things. Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And we were just talking a little bit beforehand. I was curious what your perspective on parkour was getting into this. And just from the like one question I asked you, I'm glad to know it's not exclusively the Office clip, which is the baseline for many people in America with their familiarity. But yeah,
Yeah.
what is your familiarity with parkour, if any, from your
Yeah,
perspective?
I mean, I'm certainly no parkour expert by any means, but a huge portion of my athletic background was in obstacle course racing. So I was on the Spartan Race Pro team. And so there's a lot of overlap between that and like American Ninja Warrior stuff. And so I did a lot of training at like Ninja Warrior training facilities and that kind of thing. And there's a little overlap between that and parkour. Again, not like a ton, but a lot of people that are like into one or into the other. So I got exposed to some parkour stuff, have tried some basics myself, some basic like tumbling and gymnastics things as well. And then I'm
I've seen some backflips. Yeah.
yeah, they're okay. They're okay. uh yeah, but I'd probably be more on like the Ninja Warrior slash climbing side of the spectrum as opposed to like, leaping from building to building sort of thing.
I mean, if the point B is leaping from building to building, I also would put myself more in the obstacle course slash side of the spectrum. But we were talking a bit about, so I guess for the listener who maybe isn't familiar with you, and they probably just listened to me do an intro, but you are an absolute hybrid beast. I don't remember if it was your meme or somebody else's, but one of my favorite things that I saw as somebody who likes to try and be mildly fit at running and mildly fit at lifting. It was like a hybrid athlete is somebody who kind of sucks at lifting and kind of sucks at running, or
Mm.
is kind
Yeah.
of good at lifting and kind of good at running. In your case, I think you're really, really good at both, which is insane. And we were talking a bit about where parkour programming is. I think it's gotten to a point in the sport where there are a couple folks who are pretty familiar with Olympic lifting, pretty familiar with sort of like a more powerlifting approach where they're doing a couple of sort of basic lifts really centered around, like a hinge pattern and a squat pattern thing, adding in some plyometrics, maybe doing a little bit of speed work. And yeah, you had asked when we got to that point what the sort of balance is. So I'm actually curious, before I we talk about sort of the balance of parkour, for you, how much do you feel like your speed work translates to your strength, if any?
Sure. Oh man. So like for me personally, in terms of the like hybrid thing, I think people always like kind of talk about hybrid as if it's the goal of trying to do everything. And I feel like on the one hand, that's like kind of the goal. Like as much as I'd love to be good at everything, there's so many things out there, right? Like there's always going to be something that you're not great at. I feel like any version of hybrid, or however one person defines hybrid, is going to have certain gaps and holes in it compared to how someone else defines it, and so on. And the more you really try to do literally everything, you're just going to be at a progressively lower and lower level at all the things. So for me, like I'd say my primary two goals, if I had to pick two, like most important, is physique and being able to run long distances. Those are like the two things that I really like to balance. And so with that, I still do heavy strength training, I still do speed work, I still do, a lot of the just foundational stuff, but it's all kind of serving that those primary goals of just basically trying to be the most jacked marathoner under sub 230s, like my project for this year. um, so like when it comes to speed work, it's all relative to the goal. So like speed work for a marathon runner is very different than speed work for a miler, which is very
Hmm.
different than speed work for like true sprinter, right? And so like today, for example, I did what most sprinters would probably call like tempo work. I did like 12 by 100 meters,
Hmm.
which is much faster, I think, than I would even need to do as far as like marathon training goes. Like that's much further on the speed end of the spectrum than I think most marathoners would be concerned with, and realistically is probably not going to translate a ton compared to more marathon style speed work like fast miles or 800s kind of VO2 max style training. So, long way of answering the question. Um, but I would say I do some pure speed work that probably is more serving just my overall GPP than like my marathon goals per se. I don't know if that really answered the question, but yeah, lot to say about speed work, I guess.
You could have just been like sex and zombies. That's the answer. that's that's why the name of the program is what it is. I think that's really cool. What made you pick those two goals specifically?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. It kind of circles back a little bit to wanting to do everything and trying to find like knowing that I can't really do, one set of this, one set of that, one set of that times a thousand things. I wanted to think like, what's like a few foundational things that I think, I could always be 12 weeks out from getting pretty good at this other thing, right?
Mhm.
What's something that's going to give me the capacity to do these other things well, should I decide to shift gears a little bit? And I like training for physique because you have a lot of options. Like you don't have to use a barbell or you don't have to use a specific machine. Like there's a lot of ways to lift that are going to all be conducive to developing a good physique. So I liked having those options. And I also think that if you do just put on a decent amount of muscle mass and have a good physique, you're going to build strength along with that. You're going to be able to pursue a wide range of skills while putting mass on. So I just like the generalizability of it, I guess. And then similarly, with like long distance running and marathoning, um, this is a bit subjective, I guess. But like if you take a good sprinter or someone that runs a solid 400 meters and then ask them to run a marathon, like they can't, like they're just going to suck at it, obviously. Whereas on the flip side, if you take a top marathoner and ask them to, sprint or run a fast 400, no, they're not going to be great in terms of like if you compare them to Olympic level sprinters, but like compared to some dude off the street, like you take like an Elliot Kipchoge, and like
Yeah.
I've seen some of these top marathon guys, like when they do like a shorter race like a 5K, they'll drop like a 12-second 100-meter kick at the end of a 5,000 meter. Like they're not slow. you know? And so I would say in terms of like generalizability and still being really good at all the things, I think having a strong base on the endurance side of the spectrum is still going to give you not elite performances at short distance, but you're still going to be like a monster compared to like most people just walking around. And that's kind of my goal, is not to be the best in the uh, very like small pool of athletes that train for this specific thing, but I want to like, compared to just some dude off the street, I want to be really good at pretty much everything compared to the average Joe, right? Even if
Hmm.
I'm not like going to the Olympics or anything. So yeah, just wide, like I wanted something that was very generalizable yet specific.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, the marathon distance, was your background initially in running more than strength training?
Yeah, that's probably fair to say. My background was never like hyper specific. I grew up playing a lot of different sports. Did track and field. I pole vaulted. I ran long distance, but I was like never great at anything initially. I think long distance running is just kind of the thing that I stuck with for the most amount of years. And luckily, it's one of those things where if you do it long enough, you're going to get at least halfway decent.
Yeah, it is persistence goes a long way with it for sure. I
Yeah.
like that though. Your distance is the distance that I think a lot of the average Joes would see as being a it's like attainable, but it is sort of like the peak of what many people think of as being the attainable distance. And for context for the listener, I think that your sort of casual marathon pace right now is like my max mile pace, which is just wild. Like I love watching your posts on Strava, your updates on Strava and stuff, because it's like, okay, well, I guess he's running like a 6:11 marathon pace, so I should probably be able to get close to that for at least a mile. And you put up a challenge, or I don't know if you actually originated this, but I saw that you shared this a few months ago. And it ended up going around the parkour community quite a bit, which was, something like a meme, like, oh, if you, want to
The
not
six
suck
minute
at
mile.
running, yeah, test your mile and try and run 6 minutes. And I saw quite a few people do it. Which was really cool because in our sport of parkour, a lot of it is just so dynamic, and the sprinting work is probably the biggest comp in track and field because it is maybe 5 to 10 seconds of output. If you're a competitive athlete, maybe you're out there like flipping around, essentially doing some like speed intervals for 45 seconds, and it feels more like a 200 or a 400 or something like that. But yeah, so many athletes were sitting in that space where they're basically, yeah, used to working for 8 seconds, and then you rest until you're fully ready to go again, and then you work for like 5 seconds more. And it was cool to see them. I did the test, so this was a great thing for me because I had a few years ago back, I had pneumonia right at the beginning of COVID, and then I got COVID back to back, and my lung function went down an insane amount. And so it's been like a slow build back. And yeah, your test was a great excuse because I hit 6:35 and I was like, okay, I was at 10:30 in 2022. So we're way better, but I really needed somebody to yeah, like poke me to try and push
Yeah.
that mile pace because it's like so easy when that's not your thing. Just be like, oh, it's really comfortable to run like an 8:15 and then just do that for a mile or two or whatever it is when you don't see a huge direct translation from how fast your mile is. But my question, I guess, other than to just tell you about how slow I am and to get the listener to be stoked on checking out your page and your programming if they haven't, where do you see distance wise for a sport that is maybe more dynamic because you have obviously such a diverse sporting background? Do you feel like there's a sweet spot that you found in your training where you would stick for someone who doesn't need to run a marathon, but maybe they do want to be able to run a mile or a 5K pretty quickly, knowing that they're mostly working
Mm,
in that 10 to 60-second output phase?
sure. So I'll probably answer like an adjacent question. Um, and I think it's important to like understand the difference between like a strength and power athlete who does it more like recreationally, we could say,
Hmm.
versus someone who does it um, like kind of follows like an elite schedule or program for strength and power. And I think it's important because you have a lot of people who are really into various strength and power types of things, like they care about sprinting or parkour or combat sports or something in this like shorter time domain, 10-second burst, 30-second burst, whatever. If you have people like that who like that's what they care about as a hobby, but they're doing it 2, 3 times a week, that's very different in terms of like total output and metabolic stress in the system than someone who like they're dedicating their life to that and they're at the track sprinting every day,
Hmm.
and like it's very different. And so for someone who is really, really committed and it's someone who's at the track sprinting every day, or they're doing parkour sessions every day for like pretty long periods of time, just like pure accumulation, like they're accumulating a lot of stress in their system. And like they'll probably, maybe not great, but like they're going to have some level of aerobic capacity just from like the sheer amount of training time of any sort that they're doing throughout the week, versus someone who's interested in those same things but in a more recreational capacity. They are just not putting enough total stress in the system for their aerobic capacity, their aerobic base, whatever you want to call it, to be where it needs to be to support their overall health and recovery status, as much as it potentially could. And so to really answer your question, I would say for someone who is into strength and power type sports on a recreational level, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for like low intensity cardio or doing some distance running on the side, like relatively small time commitment stuff, an extra 30 minutes here or so. I think there's a big opportunity for that to support their health status, their recovery, and actually make them better at some of their anaerobic outputs, recovery between sets, so on and so forth. Whereas if you have someone who's like already, they're like, dude, I'm already training 2 hours a day. Like I'm
Hmm.
already doing all this stuff. Like how much more cardio do I need? In that case, I'm like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Like we could take a more individualized approach to see if you're someone who might benefit from some strategic work, but I don't think it's going to be like a game changer. As much as it might be for the hobbyist, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. So I think it's
Yeah.
hard to answer broadly. I think it really depends on like what is your aerobic fitness, what is your training schedule like, consider opportunity costs, all that kind of stuff. It's complex.
Yeah. Well, I will say that for our listener and for many even professional parkour athletes, the sport is at a place where most of them are still working full-time jobs in addition to training. So there are very few who are in a spot where they're probably accumulating enough volume just purely from their sport, time spent practicing the sport. I know again, this is going to be kind of a deep cut. There's an athlete named Ed Scott who is a fantastic parkour athlete, like one of the best competitive parkour athletes in the world, and ran like a 250 marathon, I don't
That's
know,
actually
last year.
crazy. That's
Yeah,
wild.
it's insane. He does trail running. Like he's posted a video of doing like a, I don't know, I'll probably butcher this. It was like a 15K trail run, and then he's just like flipping around on the top of a summit in Wales at the end, and I'm like, that's wild, his endurance. And the thing that I think I notice about his training, obviously that is wild to be able to balance those different types of output, but he's also really known in parkour because what you just said, his recovery time between training sets or his ability to session for 7 hours throughout a day when other
Mm,
people are fried after 2 hours. I mean, he's an energizer bunny. So I'm glad that you pointed that out because a lot of people probably listening to this podcast are curious about what they can do to maybe improve their ability to just let their body recover and maintain throughout either a day or a week. And it sounds like a lot of that may just be building up a better aerobic base for that hobbyist.
100%. And I think an important distinction to make, and where sometimes people split hairs over semantics, is people will point to like low intensity cardio and say things like, I'm going to do a recovery run or a recovery ride.
We'll
And
get
it's
into the
like,
zone two shenanigans soon. Yeah.
well, I want to like, maybe it's a misnomer or like a poor way to describe those sessions, because in the acute sense, like you're not really recovering, you're adding stress. You're
Yeah.
adding additional training stress, for the most part. There's maybe some things with like your autonomic nervous system that we could talk about with promoter and recovery, but for the most part, you're adding stress to the system. Where the recovery benefit really comes in is chronically. So like, I think people will sometimes walk away from cardio with the wrong idea about it if they haven't. committed to it and really seen it through for a long period of time, they'll do 4 weeks of conditioning or something and be like, you know, they felt more tired or their performance in the gym was down or their legs felt sluggish. It's like, yeah, 4 weeks is not a lot of time to see the kind of long-term adaptations that are going to really benefit you. You're in the stacking fatigue stage. So I'd say like in terms of cardio, like, and this goes beyond just for parkour, but like I believe that cardio and just like having a stronger base of cardio and health, like general inflammatory status and nutrient partitioning and all of these things, stress management, mental focus, all that kind of stuff just takes a really long time. And so if you're someone who's wanting to use cardio to help you lose weight or improve recovery between sets or stay more focused at work or any of those things, it's like it's something you have to commit to and invest in for many, many, many months. And you probably are going to feel worse before you feel better. Especially if you go into it with any degree of like urgency and aggression where you're doing, you're ramping up quickly. Um,
Hmm.
if you ramp up really, really slowly because you don't want to feel the temporary downsides, then that's fine. It's just going to take you even longer. So it's no matter how you slice it, it's a long term investment for sure, and I don't think people always appreciate that.
That's good to hear because obviously on Instagram, people who have 6 to 12 week programs want to hype it up that you're going to be feeling amazing after their 6 to 12 week program. And while that may be true in certain cases, I think my experience with cardio or adding in more aerobic fitness in general has been what you're saying, which is the first 2 years, I was like, my joints are always 8% more sore throughout the day. And I am struggling to kind of find the right time in the week for my body to feel fully recovered to get back to that 100% output. And only now, after really being consistent for probably 18 months, do I feel like I'm getting to the point where I can run 4 miles on a treadmill and then maybe have a parkour session that same day or the next day and feel really good as long as I'm aware of kind of what pace I'm at and managing all those stressors intelligently. So for again, for like the hobbyist, uh, or this person who's maybe, let's say they're training parkour 3 times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, we accumulate a decent amount of volume and a decent amount of impact. The good thing is that in parkour, like you look at like what Matt McInnes Watson is doing right now with plus plyos. He worked recently with the parkour athlete Tim Champion, who probably many of my listeners may have even gone
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that
I know him.
that plan at this point. Yeah, and one of the best things as chatting with Tim and experimenting with that programming is the amount of low intensity plyometric work that's in that program. In parkour, we tend to be very middle to ping tier, to use the terminology. It's a lot of high intensity, and we're
Yeah.
very good at managing it over the years. I mean, I would probably argue better even than, uh, or at least as good as sort of like a high tier triple jumper, just because of the variability and the addition of like vertical drop that you're having to deal with all the time.
Uh-huh.
But adding in that low tier felt amazing for my body, and it was a really good way to maintain. Adding running on top of that, where do you feel like that would fit from your
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I feel like uh in terms of like a big picture training principle, I think a lot of um, problems can be solved and training decisions come back to just like exposing people to a little bit more variability. So like what is the thing that they need to get good at? What are they already doing a lot of? And like how can we just give them a little exposure to like slightly different variations of that that maybe they're underexposed to and just and make them a little bit more robust. And like you said, you're doing a lot of those higher intensity landings and contacts already. So adding the low intensity piece gave you a little bit more of a base in a sense to kind of borrow from endurance terminology. On the flip side, if you look at something like endurance running, to me, I think adding a lot of low intensity, like low tier plyos and stuff, maybe
Mhm.
not worthless, but I think it starts to get a little bit more redundant in like the endurance training context versus like exposing distance runners to high intensity plyos and like depth drops and things like that. Like getting them exposure to the opposite end of the spectrum, I think is more helpful. So
Mhm.
if you were going to combine or try to be a hybrid athlete that did longer distance running and um, parkour, I think you would just have to be a little bit more strategic, one, with your overall plyometric volume. You probably wouldn't be doing quite as much of the low intensity stuff. Probably still some, but just account for the stress that running's already offering you. And then maybe don't be so redundant with a lot of the like calf and ankle dominant ones. Make sure you're also getting a little bit more into, knees and hips and some of those deeper joint angles and things like that that you're not seeing in running versus just like continuing to throw more classic pogo hops at yourself, for example. I think that would be more on the redundant side.
Yeah, that's really good because what I'm hearing there is I won't say that running is a substitute for low tier plyometrics, but there's enough crossover there that somebody who's doing both of those should be aware, particularly if they are doing a lot of higher intensity plyometric work. Those things are going to impact each other, that there's going to be ripples there, or
There's
at
going to
least
be
potentially.
ripples and certainly overlapping fatigue, just to be
Hmm.
aware of in terms of like load management. Um, I'll have people who they're like newer to running, for example, and they're like starting to get shin splints, and they're like, maybe I should add plyos. And like plyos are good, but like if you're already having a stress management issue, let's not add more stress just yet. Let's get things under control and then rebuild, right? And
Hmm.
so I think that's just something to be aware of in terms of load management. If you are doing low intensity plyos and running and parkour, is like just making sure you're not overloading too much too quickly, and just being aware of like your starting point for a lot of those things.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring you back to what we were talking about earlier with the recovery run concept, and kind of where that fits into all of this. So you have some really great memes about zone two slash recovery cardio work. What what does a recovery run mean to you in a like very need to know level for the sort of hobbyist? How would you I guess how would you define a recovery run and how would you implement it?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that a lot of endurance adaptations um, are really not purely a function of volume, but a lot of adaptations are very volume driven, while others are very intensity driven. And so to me, something like a recovery run is basically just a type of workout or type of stimulus that you can do that is purely on the volume side where you're like, I'm just getting a little bit more time on feet, a little bit more aerobic hours in my week, while allowing all the high intensity stuff, my fast twitch muscle fibers, allowing all that stuff to recover. There's still stress associated with it, and that's where I think it can be misleading to call it a recovery run. It's not, there's no free lunch, right? But it's allowing a lot of subcomponents of your system to recover while you're kind of adding a more specific type of stress. So to me, it's really just a kind of fancy, maybe slightly inaccurate way to phrase just low intensity training. Um,
Hmm.
and I think it's important to know that it still is training. Um, because I think if you get too lazy with it, some people they'll be there going at like they're on the assault bike pushing like 50 watts and they're like, oh, it's just recovery. I'm like, at that point, you're not doing anything. Like just go play video games, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a huge benefit to that stuff too, like just actual recovery, like just go lay down, go eat food, go spend time with friends or family. Like that stuff is really central to recovery. And so when we acknowledge that like recovery runs or recovery rides, like it's still a stimulus, it's still a workout, it's just a very specific workout. I think it gives us some better guardrails and parameters to hit, like how do we actually do this optimally versus just like just spinning the legs and it's like, nah, just go home. Like, especially if you're a hybrid athlete, like you have um, so much training responsibility
Hmm.
already. Got the gym, you got your parkour, you got your running, you got all these things that like I think the first thing we should trim from a program in terms of like trimming the fat and getting rid of things that are unnecessary are things like the 50-watt recovery rides where it's like what you don't have that much time in your schedule for that kind of stuff. um, so in terms of like actually programming that stuff, I would still, for the hobbyist, for the person who's not doing crazy amounts of volume, I generally hold those like just a little bit below the first ventilatory threshold. So basically, find the limit of like what your conversational pace is, where you can still talk comfortably, and if you pushed a little bit harder, then you start having to take a few more breaths, kind of thing. And then just like
Hmm.
pull back maybe an extra 10% from that just to give you a little margin. It should feel easy, comfortable, conversational, but it's not exactly a walk in the park. Like it's not a literal just walk in the park
Yeah.
kind of thing either, you know?
Yeah, you want your body to be burning more calories than your brain probably is at the same time.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
If you're like getting, and people will be like, I get so bored. Um, I don't know. I feel like if there's some effort behind it, like if you're getting up to like within 10-15% of VT1, which is still very easy and comfortable. But I think it crosses a threshold where like you get some hormones going a little bit, and like I think it your brain kind of shifts gears a little bit. I don't think that that's quite as boring, versus when you're just barely moving and your heart rate's at like 100. I can see how that gets pretty boring quite quickly.
Yeah. That's really helpful, and then I think many people hear the common thing is the sort of like 20 to 30 minutes, and I think the other rule that maybe people might be familiar with is the sort of like 10% rule when you're trying to increase volume, particularly around running. What would be so again, let's say we're parkour hobbyists who is training and they just wanna not suck at running, which is where I was coming from. I was like, "I'd like to be able to run a 5K turkey trot with my family and not have that impact my health at all if I don't want it to." So, for somebody who is just trying to get to that place where they're building that aerobic base, does this sort of 20 to 30-minute zone once, twice a week feel reasonable from your experience?
Yeah, so um I don't want to like over promise or like make really absolute statements, but I would say that for the most part, when it comes to the low intensity adaptations, single session duration is not super important compared to kind of like weekly or even monthly accumulation, to be honest. Like just accruing the time over time, when it
Mhm.
comes to those low intensity adaptations matters a lot more than whether you went 20 minutes at a time or 30 minutes at a time and so on. Um, if you're more advanced, and especially if you're training for a specific long duration event, there's some like specificity demands that come with that. You'll have to hit certain time targets. But from like a general health perspective, um, I find it is easier and more recoverable, and people usually hate it less when it's dispersed a little more.
Yeah.
um, and so there's no fixed amount of like you need to go for at least X amount of time or do at least X number of sessions per week. Um, but I generally have like a slight bias in terms of enjoying higher frequency. So um, I just think it's more manageable physically, orthopedically. You get less sore. You're gonna have less interference. Like if you try to do another session that day, but you still get the weekly accumulation benefits. So I tell someone like figure out about what your weekly commitment needs to be, and then divide that across as many sessions as you think you can comfortably and you can mentally commit to. So rather than trying to do it all in one go or two sessions, like if you can take your weekly commitment and break it up a little each day or 4 or 5 times a week, I think that's generally good, especially from a health standpoint.
Mhm.
um, Again, at larger time commitments, the answer might be a little bit different, but when you don't do as much overall cardio, I think there's benefit to just breaking up sedentary time more frequently, and not having the fatigue that comes with some of those single longer sessions. So I would focus on weekly accumulation, and I think um, for someone that is otherwise somewhat sedentary, your average desk worker, hobbyist who's sitting down 9 to 5 and then fitting in some sessions here and there. I think that trying to hit 60 to 90 minutes in a week of kind of low intensity, but like close to that first military threshold, upper limit of conversational pace. I think 60 to 90 minutes a week is fantastic for most people. But there is, unfortunately, uh, and it sucks. There's always so many caveats, right? Uh, but there's a wide range of individual variation to cardio
Mhm.
response, and so it can sometimes feel unfair, where there's like certain people who are like, I only do this much cardio, and look how jacked and fast and whatever I am, and then there's other people and they're doing like 3 times as much, and they're like, I still can't run a sub 7 minute mile or whatever. Um, and
Yeah.
like part of it is like life's not always fair, man. Like some people have the cardio gene, some people don't. Um, but there's 2 points that I want to make with that. And one is that um, from a health standpoint, you don't have to be the fastest or necessarily even see tremendous performance improvements to get a lot of the health benefits. So, like in research, we see that sometimes people will do enough cardio to meaningfully impact their blood pressure, their blood glucose, their lipids. Like we see all these health metrics improve, and they don't even get faster, which like sucks for them. But like they did improve their health. Like the cardio is still worth doing. So I think that's important to note. And then two, from a performance standpoint, when the dose is high enough, um, everyone eventually gets better. So like in low volume cardio studies, there's often non-responders, which again that sucks for them. But when those people are just forced to go a little bit harder, do a little bit more, eventually non-responders disappear, and the um, kind of dose response relationship gets more predictable and more consistent when the exercise dose is larger. Um, so I think those two things are important for people to remember, that if you want to get better, or you want to improve your performance, you might just have to do a higher dose than some other people do. And if you're really just in it for the health, then just get the time in. And like if you're genetically slower, it's okay.
Hmm.
Um, Hopefully
I
all
call
that's
that
helpful
the
for people to hear.
yeah, no, I think having a specific time frame to aim for, 60 to 90 minutes, is really helpful. And I also wow, I really can't talk. I also think it's really freeing for me, at least as somebody who's got a kid who, works essentially a desk job most days and is also trying to do parkour and not suck at running and not suck at lifting and maintain things into your 30s. Hearing that it's okay to not have to commit 60 minutes in a chunk if you've been going 30 or 40 minutes, and that you can actually, there's some benefit to just go run a mile and a half if you have 10 minutes or 12 minutes. Like that is actually totally fine. Go do that. That's casual. And if that's all you can do in a day, that still counts for something. I think that'll probably be really freeing and empowering for a lot of people who maybe might hear some of these other narratives of like, oh, if you can't get 15 minutes on your assault bike or your rower or your treadmill or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's not worth it to even put 20 minutes in.
Especially from a health standpoint, like we have so much great research on basically microdosing, like cardio snacks and stuff, where it's like people will do things as simple as like 30-second bouts throughout the
Wait,
day.
that's amazing.
And
Is
like
that actually the name? Is that the name in the papers? Microdosing cardio snacks? Because that's
there's two. I've seen there's papers that will discuss exercise snacks. It's kind of a trending term in the research. And then there's one on like microdosing, microdosing it. I could
this
send
is
it
how
to
you
you.
get
I'll
that
dig it
grant
up.
money.
Right. There's been some great research like all around though on like it's just again especially for the health benefits more so than the performance side. But yeah, like 30 sec. I think they did one where it was like a 30-second kind of sprint or something like on the hour throughout the day, and it's like throughout the day it's a couple minutes of work
Yeah.
or whatever. But the health benefits are still crazy. So like I think that's important for people to remember that like even if you can't commit enough to like you know shave minutes off your 5K, like it's still you're probably going to
Hmm.
sleep better that night. And like there's going to be those ripples that do end up impacting your performance, even if kind of indirectly, even just from the littlest things.
Yeah. No, that's really great to hear. I wanted to ask you a question about your current goal. You were saying is to be the most jacked sub 230 marathoner, which is a
Yeah.
great goal. How do you balance goal setting? Like where do you shoot for? Because the parkour community is very, it's powered by ADHD, I think, at this point. Everybody essentially is distractible. And the more things that you do, the easier, as you said, it is to kind of start sucking at all of them, particularly when you're trying to set a goal. So for you, how do you go from like, okay, I want to reverse lunge 335 or 365 to like, I want to be the most jacked sub 230? Like where do those fluctuate? How often do you goal set in a year?
Mm, I mean, this is a tough one because I have clients who like are definitely more on the ADD side of things, right? And they like have a new goal every couple of months, and I think that's fine. It keeps people engaged and interested, and that's the most important thing for sure. But I think for me, the and it sounds obvious to say it out loud, the longer I can stick with a goal, the more likely I am to achieve it. And so I think just reflecting and making sure that what you're working towards is something that uh, is really gonna you're gonna find joy in that process for a longer period of time, versus like choosing a goal that's like, oh, I just think it'd be cool to hit, X amount of weight. It's like, yeah, it'd be cool, but like, is that alone is the cool factor of 3 plates on a bench press, for example, is that
Mm.
cool factor alone, is that gonna keep you wanting like, is that gonna keep you on program for a year, versus, something else, and for me, um, it's nothing special about the goal in and of itself, it's just for me, specifically, it feels like, with the genetics I have, how I've seen how I respond to different types of training or my strength is, and so on. I feel like um, being the most jacked 230 marathoner, uh, it feels like it plays well to my strengths. Um, I think it's something I can pull off, genetically. I think it stands out. I don't know. Everything about it, just like I feel really good about it. It's motivating, and
Mhm.
I know it's going to be motivating for a long time. Whereas some other goal might be like that shiny object, but I could see myself getting bored or distracted or wanting a different one. I had toyed around with um, wanting to hit a certain snatch weight and run sub 230 because I thought it'd be cool, but I
Yeah.
don't actually like I don't love Olympic lifting that much that I'm gonna like stay fired. Like I just knew like in a year from now, am I still gonna care about that as much? Maybe not, but just looking at my track record and my history, like, am I still going to care about being jacked in a year? Definitely. Like, I know that that's not going to change. So, I think just being honest with yourself about like, you know, is it, is there like a deeper thing that is motivating to you about a certain goal, or is it something that just kind of like pique your interest in that moment? And I think trying to stick with something that hits a little bit deeper for longer periods of time, I think you're going to get better results across the board anyway. I think that picking one slightly more general goal and sticking with it for a year is probably going to give you better results than having a super specific goal that's different every 3 months. I think you're probably
Yeah.
going to see your performance level up across everything just by having that more consistent approach to training than bouncing around too much.
Particularly when your goal is to just be insanely fast at a marathon and also jacked. That's broad enough, but specific is actionable, but
Yeah.
also it's like it leaves you leeway. I like that you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you also pointed out that like the goals that you set are very aligned with your sort of like core reason for doing everything that you're doing, which is the again like the physique and being able to run long distances. So it's like, yeah, cool, sub 230, actionable, measurable thing that you can do in that one, and then being the most jacked person doing it. Hard to do that and not have a good physique simultaneously. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool to find where those things align. I think that's a good thing for a lot of parkour folks because it's easy as we dabble in these other sports. Or, I mean, Olympic lifting is actually a sport and it's so technical. Like, that's Olympic lifting goals for me are the most time consuming. I don't like setting them for the exact reason that, like, the 5% increase in technique to get the amount of weight that you need often takes so much time spent on the platform. And you're like, oh, cool. I finally unlocked the exact spot that I need to start shrugging in this clean to be able to pull whatever 275 off the ground and hit it in a full clean. And you're getting like nothing
Yeah.
in the sport specific realm, like in terms of application
Totally.
between doing that and the other thing. So yeah, alignment is cool. When so you've been kind of doing more YouTube stuff recently, or at least it seems like that. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So a lot of things in the works. So when I moved here to Austin, it was kind of a big transition for me professionally, just like leaving behind an in-person business that I had in Minneapolis, to pick up potentially a new one at a new gym, that a friend is opening here in the spring. But also just like Austin has so many fitness professionals, so many cool things going on, that I just wanted to take advantage of the environment that I was in. And so I've committed to and invested in kind of going all in on YouTube. So I hired a videographer, someone to help me with my content, all that stuff. And so right now, this first 2 weeks being here has been a lot of recording. So a lot of stuff is in the works. I'm working on like a whole documentary project for the most jacked 230 marathoner. Like we're going to be
Nice.
documenting the process throughout the year. Um, I'm trying to get some
That's
sponsors to cover some
the
expenses for
ads
like
on that. If you just target like 60 plus single women, and that is going to be high performing content.
Oh yeah. I that is one
New
of my
Yorker
main
subscribers
audiences.
only. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I wanna hopefully, maybe get like some sponsors to cover some because I want to do some like intense testing. I know people are gonna ask about blood work, which is annoying because it's like it's funny because I don't really care. Like
Mhm.
I feel good. I just want to train, like I whatever. But people are gonna want to know. So I'm gonna try to track that maybe like quarterly or something. I want to do like detailed body comp. I found someone that does even better than DEXA is like MRI body composition, which I think would be really cool to have that level of detail tracked.
Mhm.
So I just want to like go all in on it. I think it'd be fun. But we're working on some other content too, educational stuff. Um, it's gonna be a lot of fun, but a lot of work too.
Yeah. I really liked the one that you did recently with Jake Tura. Well, actually, I don't know how recently. I
Yeah, yeah,
watched it
yeah.
recently. Okay. Yeah, that was great, especially for the number of parkour athletes struggling with various like knee tendinopathies. If they are not watching that, and that format was really fun because it's essentially a podcast where you also are working out, and I was able to kind of like tune out, listen to it while I'm, doing the laundry or whatever, and then come back in and see what was going on. I thought that was a really interesting, different way to absorb information that like I've heard on podcasts before. But yeah, it
Totally,
was
yeah.
cool. So,
Yeah,
do
more of
you
those
have any
coming up.
things? Okay, cool. I was gonna ask, do you have anything that you're excited to release that's coming out pretty soon?
Got a couple episodes like that coming out. The goal now, especially here in Austin, just like so many people to record with, and also now that I have someone that's actually doing the videoing and editing and stuff for me, it just frees up my time to just actually make more of them. The editing's a pain, dude. It's a
Yeah.
pain. So I'm hoping to have at least like 2 or 3 of those per month, in addition to some of the educational content and like road to most jacked 230 marathoner content. Hoping to have some of that stuff out as well. First educational video should come out next week, doing a deep dive on core training. People love talking about training abs and stuff, so I'm gonna do a deep dive on that. My goal basically is to basically quality over quantity as far as educational stuff goes. Um, so like with this core training video, my goal is like for people to watch the video and be like, "That's the most comprehensive video I've ever seen in the topic, and I'm probably never gonna watch a video on that topic ever again." Like, I just wanna, like, really put that much work into it. Like, I wanna make an hour-long video about training abs where it's like any question that anyone has ever had is addressed. And so it's gonna be a lot of work, but I want it to be evergreen,
Hmm.
where it's like I put in the weeks and months of work into a video, and then it stands for, you know, until the science or physiology changes or something like that. So there might not be as many of those, but I really want to put a lot of work into them. So I'm excited to get some of these first ones out and see what people think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited for that one too. I really enjoy. I think on Instagram you were sharing some of the banded stuff, and I also you have such a very there are very few people who can blend an analytical approach of like current research and also are aware of the current research that's happening and are able to synthesize it in a comprehensive way and then not relay that in a way that is so boring that nobody gives a shit, which is like
Yeah.
there's so many great pages and like here's all of these amazing studies that have been happening, but oh my goodness, I would like try and share that with someone who's a friend of mine and there's no chance that they're going to get past like the abstract of the abstract, right?
Yeah,
So
I want to blend the evidence based training. I want to blend the science with like bro science and vibes and like kind of get like both because I think sometimes when people go too heavy on the research and have a PubMed ID for everything. I think sometimes the like practical side gets lost. And it's like, yeah, but
yeah.
in the real world, you know, X is going to happen and so on. So I try to account for that and present a little bit of both. But it's tough because no matter what you do, there's always going to be someone that's like, well, actually this and so on. It's like, well, my biceps are bigger than yours, so you're wrong. It's like, it's hard to please everyone, but I try to kind of go down that middle ground a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're doing a really good job of it. So this is mostly for my listeners who aren't subscribed to on YouTube. They should be, because even if they're not trying to be the most jacked sub 230 marathoner, there's a lot of really helpful content on there that they can synthesize. And I did want to talk. So we were talking a little bit about recovery, and I know that you're vegan. I've been vegan for 8 years.
Oh, sick! I didn't know
Obviously,
that.
yeah. So obviously, often I get questions from the folks who know that about recovery in general, just like broad strokes, when you're balancing so many different types of stress on your body, do you have any like golden rules that you have found for nutrition?
Oh man, golden rules. I would say one, just eat enough in general.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's a big one. And as simple as it is, like I think when I was a younger athlete, I think that's something I don't know, I just didn't eat enough. Not like consciously, I wasn't like trying to maintain a certain weight or anything like that, but I think if I had eaten more, I probably would have felt better and progressed faster. So just eating that food in general. The other one, and this is a topic of balance, I would say, is like not allowing your diet to be another thing that you're stressed about. So like finding a way to like eat quality foods, eat good, like have your nutrition be good enough, but also not let it drive you crazy. I see so many people in the like performance space that like just obsess over the nitty-gritty details and become, orthorexic in some cases with like
Hmm.
just clean eating obsession. Um, Worrying about like weighing everything all the time, which there's a time and place for all those things. But I think the diet can quickly become an obsession for people that is then counterproductive and is adding stress to their system rather than facilitating recovery. So that would definitely be a golden rule for me for sure. Um, you know, I think if you get enough protein, get enough fiber, get enough calories, it's hard to have screwed up too bad. Sometimes people do one or two of those things, but not all three.
Hmm.
Um, but if you're consistently hitting protein, fiber, and calorie targets for the day, your diet's probably 80% of the way there. And so for some people, they're maybe doing good on fiber, but low on protein. A lot of people are doing great on protein, but they're not eating, fruits and veggies. So like if you can find a way to do all that, I think that's absolutely central. And then once you have done all those things, then we can talk about, dietary quality and micronutrients and carb timing and all those sorts of things. But like, if someone wants to work with me on nutrition, first thing is like, let's just see where your protein, fiber, and total calories are at, and go from there.
Hmm. When you say eat enough, and we don't definitely do not need to get into the nitty gritty here, because I doubt any or many of my listeners are even putting in enough training hours to justify stressing about their diet beyond exactly what you just said. But let's say somebody's adding in, now they're adding in 90 minutes of that sort of recovery cardio, and they're just trying to figure out how to adjust their nutrition for that. How do you determine what enough is for you, other than just being like, oh, I'm pretty full right now?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a good question. If you're already feeling pretty good about your nutrition and then you're like adding cardio and figuring out how to change it, um, I think you can do that pretty easily, just like looking at the calorie expenditure of the activity and then replacing, the majority of that. I think if you replace 100%, um, sometimes that can be overkill for some people, but not for others. There can be some like metabolic compensation in some people where they do 1,000 calories of cardio, and then they end up like fidgeting less and walking less the rest of the day because they're a little bit tired. And so you got to
Hmm.
account for some of that stuff a little bit. But I'd say like if you replace anywhere from 60 to 100% of your exercise expenditure, with some extra calories, that's not a bad start. And you can kind of see how you're feeling from there. Um, I don't know if that answered the question. I know
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, I think
It's
that's
a
good.
it's a tough one, for sure, because I think people think that like your metabolism and like how much food you need is like so fixed. They're like, I need to eat 1,800 calories a day, and or 2,500, whatever it is. Like the exact
Hmm.
number doesn't matter. They think they need a very specific amount, and that like if they eat 50 calories more than that, that 50 calorie surplus is gonna accumulate over time, and eventually they're gonna gain weight. Or like if they eat 50 calories too little, that deficit's gonna add up. And it's like, you know, surpluses and deficits add up, to a degree, but there's also so much, just like compensation that occurs too, and that's going to be variable individual to individual. So for some people, if we gave the same additional 500 calories per day to 100 people, there's going to be a portion of those people that end up gaining almost all of that as weight. They're going to gain, a pound a week or so with like 3,500 calories a week surplus. Other people, without trying, might just end up walking more because they have more energy, and
Hmm.
then they end up not gaining the weight that you thought they were going to gain, from your little, calorie calculation. And so I think because there's that individual variable response to like non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, and metabolism, and thermic effect of food, and all these things that are going to vary a little bit person to person. I think that it's hard to predict perfectly, and ultimately you just have to like adjust, measure, adjust again, measure again, and so on. Um, but I like people to at least eat as much as they can. Like I'd rather you have an extra 500 calories and go for that walk and be the same weight than restrict, 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 and move less and move less and move less. So all else being equal, I'm like, let's see what happens with a little bit more. And then if
Hmm.
we see weight going up, then we can pull back down. But like for athletes, if you're an athlete and you're not sure if you're eating enough, I would say eat more, see what happens. Worst case, you just eat a little bit less again versus
Yeah.
like sitting there wondering for months and months, am I eating enough? Am I eating enough? Just eat more food and see, does your training quality improve? Does your weight
Yeah.
actually change that dramatically? If you start eating more and your weight balloons, then like, okay, it was the wrong choice for you. But like, what's the worst that's gonna happen?
Yeah. I I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to open this rabbit hole. You I think like it's really cool to hear you talk about it. I think treating your own body as a space where you can safely experiment. Not enough people, I think, either track the variables that they're changing, or even aware that they can adjust variables in their own body and then observe the effects and make conclusions based on that. Like people just get locked into, as you said, right, this sort of like unilateral look at whatever piece of data they read 10 years ago says, or whatever RFK
Hmm.
just tweeted out
Oh
fucking
God.
2 months ago. But
Yeah.
the thing that I was curious about is, parkour is a very male dominated space. Luckily, so far, it does not seem to be as, it hasn't fallen into as many traps of, I think, body dysmorphia, disordered eating, and just all of the other sort of like weird rabbit holes that fitness has gone down.
True.
I and we can sideline this or we can not sideline this, but it's been really interesting to me because I started parkour when I was 14, and I'll give you this context because this might help for a listener who maybe doesn't know where I'm going or doesn't agree with where I'm going with this. But I started parkour when I was 14. I was getting into martial arts. I saw some highlight videos of David Bell, one of the founders of parkour, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is, Jackie Chan movie stuff. This is so cool." And then I realized there's this whole like training methodology around it, and it wasn't just this spectacular stunt thing that a handful of people did and then destroyed their bodies doing when they were like 25 and you never hear from them again, but you could actually try it. And then that at the same time, I was also kind of getting more and more into the strength world. I think growing up with all of the like Batman, et cetera, you're like, there's a certain picture that many men who are in their 30s or maybe late 20s, millennial aged men have in their head of like, this is my ideal body composition. And it's been very interesting as people in that generation have come to maturity to see what looked to me like two very diverse paths of some folks taking the lessons of fitness and going, wow, so it's really interesting how everybody responds differently. And everything that happens in fitness, there's always a what if or a contingency or a specific example where maybe this doesn't quite apply, and translating that into their everyday life. And then there's another path that sort of absorb those same lessons and then go, well, I tried really hard. And therefore, if anybody else did exactly what I had done, they would have had the exact same outcome, knowing full well that they've also observed that there's like massive variability in the way that people respond to
Oh
essentially
yeah.
any circumstance in life. I don't even know that I have a question here, but I'm curious because you are, you know, you do have this platform, and I think like one thing that's really interesting about you is you're one of the few people I see who's very openly like, I like looking strong. You have a program called Sex and Zombies that's like,
Yeah.
do you want to look good in bed? Like, there's not a lot of people who
Yeah.
talk like that have not, for lack of a better word, like come off as extremely red pilled. How do you
100%, yeah.
how do you balance, I guess, like what is your take on that? Like what are the lessons I guess that you've absorbed from your journey in fitness, and how have you applied those to your life? Because anybody who doesn't follow you on Instagram, or anybody I guess who does follow you on Instagram, and I've really enjoyed seeing this, you are very vocal about pointing out a lot of these incongruities between maybe other fitness influencers or people who are, getting into this sort of like RFK doing pull-ups culture, and then are completely unable to differentiate between what's
Yeah.
happening on one side of the world and what's happening maybe in their own space of personal development.
Oh man, it's a enormous question. So hopefully my
It's
answer
not
like
even a question, so anything
oh
you
it's
say
no man, and
reflect.
it's a very pointed observation, and like I'm grateful for you to grateful to you for like seeing that and just like bringing the topic up because I think there's a lot of cool things that we can talk about here. Um, but I think it's interesting and it's it's dangerous how quickly you can like what's the best way to say this? Maybe I'll just give an example that will show what I'm saying. When you mentioned like RFK, um, I think that there's a lot of people who moralize fitness,
Hmm.
and I've seen posts talking about how like uh, being fit or being healthy or eating well, it's like a moral obligation essentially, and you're like a failure to society, a failure to your family and your peers, you're a burden, and so on and so forth if you're fat and out of shape, for example. I see content like that from the like you said, kind of red pilled uh,
Or
side.
our Secretary of Defense in speeches to to
Exactly,
military. Yeah.
exactly. We see a lot of that kind of stuff, um, and I think it's dangerous because that like is very, very close to some of the ableism and elitism, that you see with, like, uh, I mean, just straight up, like, Nazism. Like, you can very
Eugenics.
quickly
Yeah.
go down that rabbit hole, like you say, yeah, eugenics, that kinda stuff. But at the same time, it's not that different than, like, the other kind of extreme. So, like, from each according to his ability to each according to his need of, like, maybe we aren't all capable of being this fit or this healthy or whatever, and recognizing that there's vulnerable and marginalized populations that can't work out and don't have access and so on and so forth. And so we don't necessarily get strong because it's a moral virtue, but because we have an obligation or responsibility to be there for other people who are in need. And so I think the very same ideas where we like start to moralize fitness, I think it can like the ideas converge and very quickly you go off of one end to eugenics, and you go off of another into like the swoletariat kind of idea, um,
I've never
and
heard that term. That's amazing.
but what's crazy about it is like I think ideology, oh my god, I can't say that word right now. Ideol I think once you
Ideologically.
yeah, that word.
Yeah, I
That's
got you.
crazy. Once you mess up a word 3 times, you just gotta give up. That word. I think they're philosophically aligned, for a while, and then it's like you see these branches and people get very extreme. But I think if we back up and center in like what do we agree on, I think that can help center things a bit. But I my goal in fitness, um, and with a lot of this stuff of like, you know, being uh proud to say I want to look good naked and stuff with my programs and stuff like that, um, is like to recognize I think where we can all agree. And so like n- you could call it sexualization of fitness. That's like one path. But then if you back up a little bit and veer the other way, you could argue that like on a population level, gaining muscle mass and losing fat are going to be the two simplest ways to improve health and longevity outcomes of everyone. And
Hmm.
so I think finding a way to appeal to the masses to then get them to see that side of things sometimes requires a little bit of humor, uh, and borrowing uh, ideas and phrases and things that are out there to uh, get the reach, but then get people to see your side of it. Um,
Yeah.
hopefully that made sense. I mean, I feel like a lot of the ideas that seem so contradictory out there, I think a lot of them come from the same base beliefs, and then it's how do they get twisted to serve different interests, and
Yeah, I
different
think the
powers. But yeah, I think
exactly what you just said. It's it's really fascinating to see. I mean, two things. I think the first thing that you said, looking at looking at fitness, how the moralization has happened almost universally. Like saying that I want to look good naked shouldn't be a political or moral statement, failure or, boon for somebody. Like I think that that's just a neutral thing that you should say. If that is a healthy thing that you want in your life that will make you feel better, great. Like go for it. That can be
yeah,
empowering, that can be obviously can have negative effects, but yeah, I think that seeing someone like yourself maybe demonstrate through your platform and the work that you have put into your programming and the people that you work with and how you talk about fitness, at least from my perspective, and I think I'm probably biased, but I do think that this anyone who looks at your stuff probably will pick up on this maybe to some level. You've almost like done a really great I think you have done a really great job detaching the coding, the ideological coding that has started to like get patterned on, where again it is like, oh, fitness, maybe it's because, you have a little more time or you're not, maybe you just like to push yourself because you're not as bright and you're doing this. And like there's a lot of things that maybe people will stereotype about a person who looks a certain way. And then, you look at the stereotype of like the blue-haired protester driving this the super outback or whatever, and there are all of the opposite ones where it's like, I bet that that person can't whatever bench press
yeah,
their body weight or do what, like there was that was a challenge, right? And like Zoran was like bench pressed 135 and people are giving him shit and he's like, this doesn't affect my ability to
right,
successfully manage a city at any way. And I think pointing out I think that on one end, right, having somebody like that do a thing and be like, yeah, no, I'm not very good at this. Luckily, it doesn't impact my job or function in society to any level. And also having people who can really execute the thing that is maybe overvalued or valued in especially in the
yeah.
social media environment, like so visibly, but not maybe fit the stereotype is incredibly valuable.
I think something that's very important for people to realize is that if everyone was exactly like you in terms of, you know, uh, abilities, personality, intelligence, political opinion, whatever it is, if everyone was exactly like you, society would not function. Like society cannot function with a lot of people all with the same ideas, beliefs, and abilities. We need people that are bigger risk takers. We need people that value stability and security. Like we need both of those things in a society for like all of the roles and occupations and things to happen and innovation to happen. But we need people that have different values for society as we know it to continue to work. And so when it comes to like, you know, fitness and how much you value that and moralize that, you could easily make other arguments about how it's, you know, uh, a moral, you know, virtue or requirement to be a certain education and have read certain books and know certain things, or whatever. There's a million things that you can do, and frankly, like you cannot do all of those things. And so, for every person that you could look at and be like, what a burden you are on the healthcare system. Like they are probably contributing to to society in ways that you could never dream of. And
Hmm.
there's people that could look at you spending time in the gym and like all the ways in which you're a burden on society in other ways. But that's how society works. Like some of us are burdens in certain contexts and productive in other contexts because we our society built on the idea of specialization. Um, and so I think the more people realize that, and they realize that people who are different than them and have different values than them are essential uh, for the society that they want to live in, the sooner I think we can all be friends.
Yeah, it should be a space, and it's funny because and I'm sure you know this. I know many people in the fitness space who are politically much more conservative than me that I've heard in private conversation say things that I know they probably wouldn't agree with if they just had taken kind of a second to step back. Because when you work with someone who's a mom of three or a dad who's working two jobs, and you see they're not progressing at the same level that maybe you would want them to as their coach, or you're consulting them or whatever it is, they're on your program, it's very easy to empathize with them because you understand their circumstance. And then that nuance gets lost, obviously, the further and farther you get that from that person,
Yeah.
until there becomes this like absolute moral absolutism that's conflating whatever the externalization of yeah, your morality in the case of
Well,
like how much you can bench press or how many pull-ups you can do. And it's ridiculous that we're even having this conversation. I appreciate it.
yeah.
It's ridiculous that it feels relevant because of how blatant it has become on social media from people who should not be talking about this at all.
As for maybe a more like humorous example in
Yeah.
the bit on a funny note is like people will say things like, you know, what I wouldn't want to take medical advice from a doctor who's, you know, obviously unhealthy themselves or
Yeah.
fat themselves. And I'm like, dude, I want the doctor who is like stressed out of their fucking mind. I want them smoking cigarettes. I want them to be an alcoholic. I want them obese because they are so brilliant and dedicated to the cause that that is all they can do. I want the genius but tortured doctor who's like just barely holding it together, but he's a fucking brilliant when it comes to his specialty. Like I don't understand why that concept is so hard for people. Like, yeah, in reality, like it'd be great if everyone took care of themselves and I hope he gets his life together. But like also like it's okay. Like we're not all going to be perfect and the more specialized you are at one thing, the worse you're going to be at others and like we don't all have to have it all together all the time to be intelligent or relevant or have that expertise.
Yeah. Well, if they revive House with Hugh Laurie, I will sign you up as a patient for he would be it sounds like he's your ideal doctor. It's like
Yeah.
constantly on the phone. Yeah. And
Exactly.
clearly very good at what he does. So,
Right.
well, thank you so much for taking the time and following me down all these journeys. We didn't even get to talk about how insane your mobility is. So for anybody who's listening that didn't get to check that out, obviously you're doing tons and tons of cool work on that and probably YouTube videos in the future, I would assume.
100%. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for having me on. Enjoy every bit of the conversation. I'll definitely share this around my channel. And if you're ever down in Austin, Texas, let me know. It'd be great to get a workout in.
I really wish I had not talked Alex ear off as much as I did, but hey, here we are. I appreciate him for being such a sport and for letting me give him context on so many things in a really unguided way. Didn't do my best as a host on this one, but I hope that you guys, as the listener, got something out of it anyway. He's so knowledgeable. I mean, there were so many takeaways in this from specifics about how to train your cardio and improve your longevity and improve your endurance, all the way to the nutrition stuff. And I also found his insights personally on the political level pretty compelling. I hope you guys did too. Took some notes. And again, I'm going to plug his Instagram Alec Blenis. Go there and check out his programming. It is $35 a month for an unlimited bundle that you can adjust to whatever you're currently working on, whether it's power, whether it's, speed, or just you want to be fitter, faster, and look good in your underwear. He's got it all, and I couldn't recommend it more. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and I will see you next week.